All right, welcome back. Uncut with Jay Cutler. This week we have Jedediah Bila. Probably most of you are going to be familiar. She was on The View. Did not go, I think, as planned in her mind. Maybe it went as planned for The View and that group of people. But kind of want to bring her on. I think she's kind of being misinterpreted a little bit, being called anti-vax, right wing, all the things. But I kind of want to give her a safe place to talk this week, hear her out. I am not anti-vax. If you want to get the vaccine, all about it, support you. I think she is kind of saying the same things. There were some stats thrown out afterwards that we'll probably talk about. I'm sure she'll have some stats she wants to talk about. So we're going to do this. It might piss some people off. It might not. I think I'm big into critical thinking. I want you to think about all the decisions you make, but I think we're living in a world where everything is vaccine related, everything is mask related. So I want you to think that through. I think that she's going to agree with some of the things that I say. I think I'm going to agree with some of the things that she's going to say. I'll challenge her on some things, and we'll see where this thing goes. But a little bit against the grain of some of the podcasts I've had in the past, which is fine. That's what we're about. Some of them are going to be topical. Some of them are going to be fun. Some of them are going to just be for shits and giggles. But this one's going to be a little more hard-hitting. Probably not, but a little more hard-hitting for the usual things that I do. So let's get Jedediah on. Let's have this one out. Okay, welcome back. We've got a special guest that had a little turmoil this past week that we'll get into. Jedediah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay. I appreciate it.
We'll get into all that, but you have a book out right now, right?
I do. It's called Dear Hartley. Went on a certain show to promote a nice book with a baby. Just a nice book with a baby, Jay. Beautiful smile, and leave it to me to create turmoil. What can I say?
That's right. What's the book about?
So it's a series of letters to my son. I wrote this during the pandemic, and I was looking around at a world that was increasingly mad, first off, but also just increasingly divided.
Yeah.
And I was finding that people couldn't talk to each other anymore. People within families, friendships, everything was just going by the wayside. And people were scared. They were confused. And I was looking at this little baby who was 1 year old. And I was like, I need to tell him so many things. I have so many things I want to say to him. So I started writing these letters, initially handwritten letters, to him about everything, things that I want for him in life. I want him to be a free thinker, and I want him to care about his health and be the owner of his own life and the architect of his own life. I talk about character and friendship and heartbreak, and there's a lot of secrets in there about my own life because, you got to reveal your own secrets to help your kids grow. And ultimately it became a book for all of us. I originally wasn't going to publish it. It was actually going to be something I just hand wrote for my child. But I felt like the world needed it because of all the division and what was going on. And I was like, maybe this will remind people at the end of the day that we're all still people, and we should be able to have conversations that are, cover tough topics without shutting each other down and whatnot. So that was the premise of the book. And it's a beautiful book. I hope people read it, but a little bit of turmoil has erupted this week. You are right.
That's all right. Where are you from?
So I'm from New York City, actually. I grew up in Staten Island.
Gotcha.
I talk a little bit about that, my upbringing. I grew up behind the Staten Island Mall. People used to joke, oh, you grew up behind the Staten Island dump. It's true. I did. That's where I grew up. I grew up to a very middle-class family. Yeah. My parents had to work really hard to pay off that mortgage, and I somehow landed on television. I'm still not sure how. And I'm a New York City girl.
Gotcha.
Born and bred.
Yeah, you're author, television. You were on The Five on Fox News. You're a co-host of The View in 16 and 17. So yeah, you've been out there in this world for a little bit.
Yeah.
Of doing it.
That's right. And I started out, I was a school teacher actually before I got into television. I taught middle school, high school, and college for 6 years.
Oh, wow.
So I'm not, a politico. I wasn't born into a political family. I didn't have any fancy connections. I was just some girl who had an opinion. And I think that's what resonated. People were like, she just sounds like she's telling us what she thinks, which is true, which gets me into trouble often. Very often, but it's worth it, right?
Yeah. In politics, I mean, I feel like in the last, 5, 6 years, politics have really divided us. I mean, I remember as a kid, like I grew up middle class, in Southern Indiana, and like politics just weren't, they weren't really a topic. Like, you'd talk taxes and, there was kind of right and left, but like you could kind of be in the middle. And like, I feel like we've kind of lost that whole middle ground in general now. And it's, if you want to have that conversation and be in the middle, you get attacked by one side or the other.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I worked in cable news for a long time, and people have to realize that's the business model of cable news.
Yeah.
That is the goal. It's division is a business model, and it's like Republican, Democrat fight, and it's interesting. When I started on The View, when I was hosting there, the show was, not super political. We did a lot of pop culture. We actually had, Candace Cameron was on at the time, Raven Simone was on. So it was a lot of pop culture. It was a lot of celebrity news, entertainment. And now it's so heavily political. It's changed because it's kind of gone with the tide. And I think when you look at social media too, that's just empowered all of that division, because everyone kind of gets in their corner. Everyone wants their echo chamber. They want to hear, I'm right. They want their own viewpoint echoed back at them. And it's bad for everyone. It's bad, especially for kids, because they're growing up in a world where they feel like on every issue, it's like, let me pick my side and let me pick my team. And it's like, why can't people just think for themselves? I've gotten into an extreme amount of heat at every network. This goes for the right too. So the right is not exempt, for just having an opinion that doesn't go along 100% with what the audience or the network expects me to say.
Yeah.
And I'm tired of it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally agree with you. Like if you don't even, you could be a Republican, and if you're not, let's say like if you're not all in on guns, like I'll kick him out, get him out of here.
Right.
And if you go on the left side, you're not all in on whatever it is, like, oh, get him out of here.
Right.
So it's tough. So I mean, you knew the girls on The View, you were familiar with it, you've been on it. So they wanted you to come on, a couple of weeks ago, but you weren't vaccinated.
Right. So not only do I know them, but Sonny was at my wedding. These are people that, Sarah endorsed my book.
Yeah.
It's on the back cover. These are people who I've communicated with for a really long time. Whoopi and Joy as well. Like we've emailed back and forth. So what happened was I was supposed to go on in October. And I have a medical exemption to the vaccine, written by, basically what happened was I had COVID 19 months ago.
Okay.
I recovered. I have this immunity that exists that's documented through lab work that I've followed for the entire year. I've been really diligent about that out of curiosity as well, to see what happens to these numbers, what's going on. I've been working with a vaccinated infectious disease specialist in New York City. And I reached out to a few doctors that I trust. Some navigated me through Lyme disease a few years ago. Some navigated me when I had a couple of lingering symptoms from COVID when I got it. And they said to me, listen, for you, this vaccine doesn't make sense. And here's why. It's a greater risk to you than you are a risk to anyone else. You're not going to get anyone else sick. We are confident in your immunity. We will write it down. We will provide documentation. But there are risks for you because of some stuff that I had pre-existing way prior to COVID. So I said, okay, that makes sense. I trust you all. You're my doctors. You know my medical history. So I went to The View. I submitted a medical exemption. Initially, it was approved. And I was supposed to go on in October. They came to my house. They COVID tested me. Obviously, I COVID tested negative. I got a call the next morning. Oh, things have changed. You need to be vaccinated to get in the building. So I was like, okay, I wish I had known that, but okay, all right. But, let's see what happens.
Can we talk about, the doctors and the natural immunity? Like what happened? Like, why isn't that talked about at all really in the media? I remember whenever I was a kid, and I'm sure if you got the chicken pox, you had them once and then you were done. Like you had the natural immunity to it, so it was over with. But I know there's studies overseas of natural immunity and how great it is to have that, and it's probably protects you more than the vaccine does. But that isn't even mentioned by anybody.
Some doctors do talk about it. Some do. Norman Carey is a guy that you can follow. There are some doctors out there because it's hundreds of years of medical history, and they don't want their whole profession discredited. When I was pregnant, I went for a blood test, and they tested titers to see if I had antibodies to measles, mumps, and chickenpox. And she came back and she said, because it could be dangerous if you're pregnant, if you get these things. It came back, I had the antibodies. She said, okay, great. She didn't say, oh, you have the antibodies, let's then vaccinate you. That doesn't make sense.
Not at all.
So, and you have to just acknowledge the data. I mean, if you look at studies that are coming out of that, there's the largest study that came out of Israel. It was like a 700,000 plus population study. They tested everything and they showed that people with natural immunity were 27 times more protected. There are now 128, probably more this morning. Every day I wake up, there's another one. Studies that document that natural immunity does exist. And the reality is you can't monetize natural immunity. So I think that Big Pharma has an interest in not acknowledging it. Yep. The CDC puts out a ridiculous study on national immunity where they cherry pick data, and they said essentially that people hospitalized with COVID-like symptoms were representative of the whole population. It makes no sense. So it's not accurate, and we need to acknowledge it because this isn't about me. This is about people all over the country that are getting fired. I mean, nurses, doctors that worked in the trenches at the start of the pandemic, making people, trying to get people well. They were good enough to work then, but now suddenly they need this. And they're doctors. So now you're going to tell doctors, I'm a media pundit. I know better about what's best for you than you. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Not at all.
So I think politically, some people are invested in prolonging this pandemic. There's a political motive to that. And I think that Big Pharma, they want everyone to get the vaccine, but it's not for everyone. And that doesn't mean that it's for no one. There are people out there that if they decide, listen, I have a comorbidity, my doctor has recommended I get vaccinated, go do it. No one is telling you what to do. Just don't tell me what to do because you're not my doctor and you don't know my medical history.
And we'll get into the view here in a minute, but you got labeled as anti-vax by, I'm sure, numerous people. But like what I'm hearing from you is like you're just like against the mandates. If you want to get it, get it. If you don't want to get it and you've got a reason, don't get it. And that's kind of where I stand. And I'm like, it doesn't matter to me what you want to do. If you feel like that is the best situation for you and protects you the most, I'm all about it.
That's exactly right. And I'm not anti-vax. I actually stress that because I knew I would get thrown, anti-vax Bila. But my parents got vaccinated. It was important to them. They felt that was the right decision. They made that decision with their doctors. I made those appointments for them. I drove them to those appointments. My child has received some other vaccinations, but I do my own risk benefit analysis. And this is supposed to be a free country. I'm not threatened by other people doing their own risk benefit analysis. No. I mean, we know with COVID, there's been a lot of questions about the vaccine. Now you have, waning immunity. Even Dr. Fauci himself is saying you may need to sign up for boosters every 6 months. Not everybody's going to want to do that. And we know there's different risks. It's not the same thing for a young 20-year-old with no comorbidities as it is for, someone who's 85 years old and has multiple comorbidities. You're not in the same risk bracket. So why are we treating everyone the same on a vaccine that we know wanes? And we know does have side effects, particularly what we're seeing with myocarditis. No one wants to talk about that in young boys. These are just facts. Science needs to be questioned. That's why it exists. So I'm just saying I'm somehow controversial for saying make your own informed decision. If that's controversial, we have a problem in America.
Absolutely. And I think that if you go into liberals and you go into Democrat, to segue to that, like that's kind of like their whole thing of saying, hey, like, do your thing, I'll do my thing. Like that's pretty much their platform. Like, hey, let's appreciate everybody. Let's be open. Let's give hugs. Let's do everything. But I guess they draw the line there of the vaccine of saying, no, we can't be inclusive of that. Which I have a hard time with.
That used to be what the Democrat Party looked like to me. And now it doesn't to me. It doesn't. There's a lot of control. Look at Bill de Blasio. You can't walk into, I'm in New York City still. I'm going to be leaving. I was actually looking at Nashville. We were looking at Texas. But you can't go into a restaurant and eat something, a sandwich. So you could be someone who has a medical exemption where your own physician is saying, this isn't good for you. And you can't be a participating member of society in New York City. You can't go to a gym. You can't go to a museum. You can't go to a movie theater. You can't go to a restaurant. That's active discrimination against these people. And it also doesn't make sense because I could go get a COVID test negative, have the immunity that I have. I can't walk into a restaurant. There could be someone sitting in that restaurant with a nice little vax card, but they have a breakthrough infection and they're getting someone else sick because we know there's hundreds of thousands of people who did get vaccinated. Just a fact that got COVID and transmit COVID. The CDC even says that. They say that's the thing. So this is not grounded in science. It's active discrimination. And I don't understand why. I see protests. It's like, no, you need to be doing more. This is your health. This is your children. Wake up.
Yeah. And yes, absolutely. I totally agree. Build some confidence into your new winter wardrobe and RSVP yes to every holiday invite on your calendar with new looks from Express. Express offers confidence-boosting styles designed for real-life versatility in every holiday event on your schedule. And if you're going to make it through the holidays, you better be comfortable. So check out Express sweaters. They're seriously soft and versatile. Their sweater flannel is handsome and comfy, and it comes in classic silhouettes like turtleneck, crew neck, and V-neck. And of course, Express has all the essentials, including their new long-sleeve Henleys and their classic crew necks. Be on the lookout for great deals in their stores or online at express.com. Find a fit for every RSVP at Express. So you go in the view, you didn't really get that far into it. And she was like, hey, let's address the elephant in the room. You haven't been vaccinated. It seemed like they had an agenda from me. How did you feel?
How this went down is I did like I said, I was supposed to host there in October and then we signed up for November. We decided it was going to be remote. We did a full pre-interview where I talked about how I felt about the mandates. They knew exactly what I was going to say. Full pre-interview. I sent, the producer there, the segment producer there sent me back a transcript of what we discussed. They knew exactly what was happening.
Yeah.
So, and I even had spoken to the EP and he was like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start with the book. We're going to ease into this conversation about mandates. And, the whole book is about being able to talk with people you disagree with. So I was like, great, this is an opportunity to showcase what I'm about and how I feel. Anyway, I get on and I just simply start talking about, hey, this is my experience with the exemption and whatnot. And here's why mandates aren't justified. And I cite the CDC.
Yes.
Not because I think the CDC has been amazing on everything, but because folks on the left love the CDC. So I said, hey, the CDC on its own website says, if you have COVID, if you are vaccinated, you can still get COVID and you can transmit COVID. That's their words. If you are vaccinated, you can still get sick and you can still get someone else sick. If those are the factual grounds upon which we're justify a mandate to me. Why? Someone unvaccinated can get sick. Someone vaccinated can get sick.
Yes.
Someone unvaccinated and vaccinated can spread it. Anyway, they shut me down as misinformation without letting me talk and explain, like, hey, instead of coming back and saying what I would have loved, and I think the audience would have loved, is a real conversation. Come back at me and explain why am I wrong? Is the CDC wrong? Let's talk about the studies. Let's talk about, the people out there who feel that they're protected, and let's hash it out.
Yeah.
And it just kind of proved my point, which is that if you don't do that, you're doing no one a service. I will say, Jay, I got so many messages. I was flooded with messages. A lot of people saying, you know what, I don't see it the way you do, but I really wanted to hear what you had to say.
Yeah.
So there is a hunger out there, which I think is why people are turning to podcasts like yours, and they want to hear people talk. They don't want this 2-second soundbite. You disagree, you're shut down, get out. They don't, they're tired.
Oh, absolutely.
So that was the silver lining. It was like I had hope in the next generation. I was like, okay, there's people out there that haven't lost their minds and they just wanted to hear us go back and forth, which is what I thought. I know people say, oh, you had to know what you were getting into. No, I didn't, because we did the full pre-interview, and I'm like, you guys, come on, man.
Yeah. If you did the pre-interview and they're like, hey, like we can't hit this, and this, like we can't do that, like that's different. But if you did the pre-interview, you talked to the EP, and they're like, hey, like we're good to go. I would have thought the same thing. I would have been like, oh, this is going to be great. Like, I'm going to hear their point of view. They're going to hear mine. We're going to have a little debate, but like we're all going to respect each side.
Right. And these are people like I said, I do respect, like, I've worked with them. I I believe that these are people who, before I went in, I'm like, these are people who they have their own concerns. Like, let me hear them. Let's walk in each other's shoes for a second. If, one of the chapters in the book is on empathy and compassion and why it's important to take a minute to just see where someone else is coming from. I was happy to do that. I was ready. I was like, this is but it goes both ways. That doesn't mean I'm there polite and you shut me down. That's just kind of horrible. But it kind of ironically, I was like, wow, this just made this book even more important because that's what I'm saying needs to happen. And look, it's not happening.
You're totally right. And then I went and I saw, I think somebody on The View, they Instagrammed some stuff afterwards. And, they were talking about some of the CDC stuff. And I think one of the things was basically if you're vaccinated, you lessen your chance of transmitting it. Which okay, I mean I get that. If she would have said that and gave you a chance to talk about it, I'd be like, oh, okay, that'd be great. I hear that. I mean I'm totally on board if the CDC says if you get vaccinated that lessens your chance of transmitting it to somebody else. Sure, it lessens your symptoms. Sure, I hear all that. It still doesn't change my mind of whether or not it should be mandated or not, though.
Right, and then I would have come back and cited, a study that shows, a recent study that shows that vaccinated and unvaccinated people, when they have COVID, have the same amount of viral loads. They looked at a new household study that showed that the viral load is the exact same. Your symptoms may be different, but if you are symptomatic, if you have COVID, if you test positive for COVID, you're vaccinated or you're unvaccinated, you're carrying the same amount of viral load. So there are studies that absolutely refute that. But regardless, I would have loved to have that happen on air. That's why I was there.
Yeah.
Also, if you say that a vaccine lowers your chance of transmission, what is that number? Tell me what that number is. Does that mean you're 20% less likely? And does that justify then a mandate? Because a mandate to me means that you are placing two categories of people. You are saying this category is risky and this category is not. So being less likely, even if I accept that premise of being less likely to transmit, which I do not, because I've seen numerous studies that show the opposite. But if that's true, what does less mean? And doesn't that still mean that those people that are less likely are able to get sick and transmit virus? You don't need to take my word for it. All you need to do, and again, this is not coming from a position of wanting to tell anyone what to do. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of the realities here.
Sure.
But you look at places where everyone's vaccinated, or almost everyone's vaccinated. Look at countries around the world where the vaccinations rates are really high. Look at states around the country where your vaccination rates are high. Look at places, shows, Broadway show, wherever it is where vaccination rates are high. People are still getting it and passing it who are vaccinated. That is a fact.
Yes.
It is a fact.
Yes.
So you can still justify someone getting the vaccine if they have a conversation with their doctor. 100%. I'm not here to tell anyone what to do. I'm not here to play doctor. But you cannot justify an unscientific mandate if people who are vaccinated and unvaccinated can still get it and pass it. And that is the reality.
Drop the bomb there. I mean,
but they didn't want me because this is what it would have looked like, right? Yeah. Maybe that's not what they want. I don't know. It's sad to me that I left that space and I went to, and I did all these podcasts and we just talked it out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is what people want to see, you know? You just pushed back on me and said, oh, this was mentioned. And also, I saw those little posts that were put up and that's great. But that was for on air. That's why I was there. I wasn't there to go, I'm not going to go on you, talk to you now.
Yeah.
And then the segment ends and you go and write up a whole email about, oh, well, this. No, you would say it.
Exactly.
Otherwise, did you not have that stuff accessible to you? It just doesn't make sense.
True. And to your point, vaccine. I mean, you can just look at California versus Florida. I mean, Florida's wide open, and California is, closed, masks, the whole thing, and they're having more cases than Florida daily. I mean, I think I was looking at one of the most vaccinated states, like Vermont, or one of those up there, is one of the most vaccinated states in the country, and their cases are sky high.
Right, and I also ask people okay, so is the vaccine protective to you or not? Because there's people coming at me who are triple vaccinated now. They've had the full
Wow.
regimen and they've had a booster,
Hmm.
and they'll say to me, well, it's almost like, well, my vaccine doesn't work unless you get vaccinated. So in other words, I'm vaccinated, but I need you to get vaccinated with the same stuff that I got that didn't make me feel protected in the first place. So what exactly is this just about controlling other people?
Hmm.
What exactly is going on? Because, I have my natural immunity. I'm very confident in my natural immunity.
Yeah.
I have it documented. I've been studying it. I don't worry about anyone else. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter to me. If somebody
Yeah.
else wants to get vaccinated because that's in their best interest, okay. If they don't, I'm not worried about being around you because I know what I'm dealing with my own body. So if you're triple vaccinated and you're still not comfortable, you need to think about why. And that has nothing to do with me.
No. And that's what I don't understand. Like, people that get the vaccine, like, the vaccine is supposed to protect you. Like, that's why you got it. So why do you care so much about somebody that didn't get it? And I mean, that's what you just said. I just don't understand the thought process. And there's certain people that you just can't, they just won't have a conversation about it. And I'm like, you have to explain this to me though. Like, you have to break this down, like your thoughts in your head, and you have to, because I want to see it. I want to listen. I want to understand it. I've just found very few people that can, I don't know, articulate or tell me why.
You know what I think it is? I think that there's a lot of fear around this disease. I think when it started, I remember when I got sick 19 months ago, I was terrified. We knew nothing about COVID at that time.
Sure.
I had a 4-month-old. I was like, my baby, you didn't have the data on children. You didn't know there was a 99.997% plus survival rate. I didn't know how it was going to affect me. I was like, I had some pre-existing stuff years ago. I feel great, but I'm like, is there something it's going to trigger?
Yeah.
There were no treatments. You couldn't get into a doctor's office. You couldn't get a test. So I think what happened was people were afraid, and that just stuck with them. They saw loved ones die. They saw a lot, they're looking at numbers. Now we have data on people who died from COVID versus people who died with COVID.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people in the hospital who died, who went in. They had asymptomatic COVID. They were tested. It tested positive, and then, they died from something else not related to COVID, and they died now with COVID.
Yeah,
These
labeled
are
as COVID.
facts.
Yeah.
These are facts, right? And we need to talk about them. That's not to discard the realities that a lot of people did get sick and die, and that's horrible. This was a horrible, horrible thing that happened to not just our country but the world. But you can empathize, and you must empathize, while at the same time saying, well, hold on a second, though, these are the facts. I think people got stuck in that fear. I know I worked from home for a really long time. Looking back, did I need to work from home that long? No. But I sat that, like, I wanted to track my natural immunity. I was very close with my parents at the time. We were all quarantined together. I was worried about them and their, comorbidities. I was really, really careful. But when I saw that schools weren't opening way beyond when they could have safely, I was visiting schools. I was like, wait a second, this is totally doable. Why is this going on? When I heard that, the CDC was colluding with teachers' unions to craft school return policies, that's politics. That's not health. So I don't want politics in my health. I want individual people making individual decisions in their best interest with their doctors and their families. And I don't want to play doctor for you. Just don't play it for me.
What worries me about this is, like, I think you're totally correct. Like, it's fear-based now. And, there's certain media outlets that keep feeding into that. And, I think there's going to be people wearing masks, 2 years from now.
Oh, yes. No, I agree. And again, like, there is a difference. The CDC put out a tweet recently about 80% effectiveness of masks. And I was like, I mean, is this a joke? What are they talking about? Are they talking about N95 masks fitted for doctors in hospitals that are actually fitted for them? That's different. Or are they talking about like a cute little leopard cloth mask from Etsy that I buy that looks terribly stylish, but like I'm not really doing anything? You have that. Science is not supposed to be political, and you're not supposed to just throw these numbers out there to tell people the truth. Let them decide. But yeah, it's true. And a lot of people now with the masks, to be honest, like, it's like that's their their security blanket. You know,
Yeah.
my kid walks around with a security blanket. He's 2 years old. He wants his blankie, you know, that
Sure.
I'm like, that's your blankie now? Like, everyone needs to just step back and say, what are the facts? Do you want to live in a world where you're walking around? I mean, my kid's never been to a doctor's office without looking at someone with a mask. I don't want
Yeah.
that for him. He's so
Yeah.
afraid because he doesn't understand what that he wants to see your face. That's how kids, I taught in school in classrooms for years. That's how kids learn. They need to see your mouth move. That's how they feel comfortable engaging with other people. There's so much that goes into not having a concealed face for children. So again, and do the risk benefit analysis. I read a tweet the other day. It was like somebody was saying, oh, I'm afraid to go to the grocery store, you know, bring my 3-year-old to the grocery store. And I thought, do you know the stats for a 3-year-old?
Yeah.
Are you afraid to get him in the car to go there? Because that's actually more dangerous if you look statistically than COVID for a child. The flu is more dangerous for children, than adults, than COVID. You know, adults are separate, but you know, I taught in classrooms for 6 years. There was never a mask policy for the flu.
No.
There was never a mandate for. So just, you know, people need to step back from cable news. They need to step back from political media, and they need to say to themselves, what are the facts? I'm going to do my own research. I know my family. I know their medical history. I know the risks. Now the power is in my hands, and everyone's going to have a line in the sand. So everyone's is going to be different.
Totally. I mean, and knowing your medical history and knowing you, I mean, we still, I mean, we have, you know, 650,000 people die from cardiovascular disease. There's 600K from cancer. You know, we're now at 100,000 people dying on overdoses. So I mean, we've got serious health issues out there that aren't helping COVID. I mean, you know, there was a bunch of studies of underlying issues from deaths of COVID. And like, you know, most of these people had, you know, they were cigarette smokers, or they have some sort of heart thing, or they, you know, there was usually something that was tied into it, and we're kind of just scanning over that as a society instead of saying, hey, like, maybe we need to start getting in better shape. Maybe we need to look at our health. Maybe we need to look at our food. You know, big pharma with all the drugs we're putting out there. I mean, there's a lot of issues that are being overlooked just saying, hey, just wear your mask, take your vaccine, and you'll be fine, which isn't the case by any means.
Yeah, why not a discussion from all these experts on actual health? You know, you can't talk about comorbidities. You can't talk about obesity. You can't talk. I mean, at one point they were giving out donuts. You know, hey, you buy a donut and you're going to, you know, I mean, and I'm just thinking to myself, okay, that's the wrong message. Like, why can't people talk about real food?
Yeah.
And I got, you know, my health journey is really important to me because when you get something like Lyme, I got a late stage diagnosis on that. It kind of ravaged my body I was like, whoa, what is going on?
Sure.
And I had to kind of look at different forms of medicine. I looked at holistic medicine. I ultimately got my way to being healed by changing my diet, taking really great supplements, going through a holistic protocol that looked at me as a whole person and not following a one-size-fits-all approach. Originally, when I went to traditional medicine doctors, they were like, oh, Lyme disease, 2 weeks, here's your antibiotics, go. I did that. And I even did 4 months of antibiotics. It didn't work for me. It wasn't for me.
Sure.
That's not to say maybe it did work for somebody else. Maybe the herbals that I took Chinese herbals, maybe that worked for somebody else. For me, I had to find another path. So my passion, this is like my sweet spot, you know, big government and health is like my sweet, because I'm like, hey, I lived it. And I know that you have to kind of chart your own path, and the body that I'm in is different from yours and my husband's. I mean, even my husband and I, you know, we both had COVID. I reacted completely differently than he did. Different symptoms. Part of that was because Jeremy was, you know, completely unfazed, didn't care, and was walking around eating ice pops. And I was dramatic and like, oh my God, what if everyone dies? This is, I was doing my Oscar-worthy performances. And I do think that fear plays into healing. But where are all these doctors? I mean, put on a mask, get a vaccine is not. What about prevention?
Yes.
What about if something like this happens in the future, a different strain of something? What about all of that? Building up your body so that the body that these viruses or whatever it may be faces is armed with all of these good things to protect it. I write about all of this in the book too. I write about my Lyme journey. And I write about wanting my child to not feel powerless,
Hmm.
to feel like he has some control over thee. Not all, you're not going to be able to control everything, but you can control something. And they're not even talking about it, these
No.
experts. So I'm not seeking medical advice from someone who has a one size fits all prescription. You walk in, oh, you have this, exit. No. What is my history? What has happened to me in my life physically? Like what is the whole picture here? If you're not interested in that, then I'm not interested in you
Yeah,
as a doctor.
I feel like we've kind of got away from, critical thinking. And, I've read books on this, and, there's, the doctor, there's certain professions out there that people in general just take their word for it and say, hey, they said this, lawyers, I'm going to do this. But we've kind of gotten to a space now that I don't want to say that we can't trust doctors. We just can't trust all doctors anymore because we're big pharma. They're skewed a certain way. Liberal, Republican, all these things, and the critical thinking of people has kind of just laxed these last couple years, and I'm fearful of what's going to happen the next year.
Yeah, I mean, people need to ask questions. If you have a doctor that you can't ask questions to, there's something wrong. I remember my husband had a doctor. He doesn't go to the doctor a lot, but
Hmm.
when he had COVID several months later, he wanted to get an antibody test. Right when actually the vaccine came out, he wanted to get an antibody test. He actually had an antibody tested himself because we both had it. We had both had a positive COVID, test. So we knew, and he was like, I'm not really leaving the house too much right now. He was working from home. He was like, you test your antibodies. I'll test mine when I have to. So eventually he went and he said, he made a call and he said, I want to get an antibody test. And the doctor was like, well, the vaccine is out, so I'm not really doing those. And he said, well, I want to make sure, my husband said, I want to make sure that this is appropriate for me. And he was like, well, I'm just telling everyone to get the vaccine. So my husband dropped that doctor because that's not someone who's interested. First of all, you go to a doctor, you have a concern.
Hmm.
It's their job to listen and try to,
Absolutely.
that's just not an appropriate. I also have spent, the better part of this last year on the phone with physicians, not just related to my condition, but the
Hmm.
vaccine in itself. I've heard some crazy stories. I mean, there's a doctor who is vaccinated himself. He's not anti-vax. Again, I always feel the need to say that because people, like to write their headlines.
Yep.
But he had a patient who got the first shot, had an anaphylaxis response, was rushed to the hospital. He got the shot because his company mandated it. He hadn't wanted it, and the doctor hadn't thought it was best for him. He got
Hmm.
anaphylaxis. And the company was like, well, next time it'll be better. He still needs to get fully vaccinated. The doctor was like, wait a second, hold on a second. Not everything is for everyone. If you have a child and you take them in for a measles vaccine and they have an anaphylaxis reaction, you get a medical exemption. You don't just take your chances next to,
Yeah.
so like it just all common sense and just looking at each patient as an individual. They're trying to rip that out of doctors' hands too. There's
Yeah.
many frustrated doctors.
Oh,
Of
I'm
course, there's
sure.
many allies to big pharma that will
Yep.
say whatever big pharma wants, but there's a lot of good doctors that are like,
Oh,
wait a minute, my
absolutely.
whole job relies on me being able to go patient by patient, and they're
Yeah.
all different. Don't take that away from me.
Yeah. Totally agree. And I mean, I'm sure people listening right now, like, and there's probably going to some people that disagree with us, but like, I think we're saying the same thing. Actually, I know we're saying the same thing. We're not anti-vax.
Correct.
We have problems with the mandate. There's good doctors out there, just like there's great people everywhere. We just want people basically to think about this. We want this to be a case by case bias. That we don't think there's a one size fits all here. And we're open to basically talking about anything. We're open to your views, just as we hope that people are open to our views.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I'm not anti, like, it's not my job to decide what's best for anyone else.
Sure.
And I think people need to sit back and think about this because maybe this issue doesn't bother you. Maybe
Hmm.
maybe you're like, you know what, I'm going to vaccinate myself. I'm going to booster myself every 6 months. I'm going to vaccinate my children. I'm going to booster my children. There
Yeah.
is going to be some issue down the road, if not this one,
Yeah.
where someone, either a government bureaucrat, a corporate bureaucrat, is going to come in and decide they know better. They know what's best for you more than you know what's best for you. And that's going to bother you at some point. So just look at it through the lens of that. Someone like me is not trying to tell you what to do. They are trying to tell you and everyone else what to do. At some point, the issue is going to hit home for you. And you're going to need people like me and like you and others out there saying, well, wait a minute, maybe this issue works for me, but we want to protect the rights of those people out there who don't want to comply with this because it's not grounded in science. It's not. And that's where the facts come in. The mandate, the choice to get vaccinated can be grounded in science for some. That is between you and your doctor. You need to make that decision. The mandate is not. No. It's just not. So I will oppose that to the end because I can't. All of these people who worked so hard, to think about the delivery people. They were delivering packages.
Oh gosh.
We were cheering at one point in New York City for people who, worked for the post office and that were working, nurses, doctors. Now suddenly we feel like, well, we can tell them if they don't do what we want, then they should lose their jobs and not be able to feed their families. That's a horrible, horrible message to send, especially on grounds that aren't scientific, when we know that even if they go tomorrow and get that vaccine, they could still get and spread that virus. So that is a personal decision. That is their risk assessment. That is not our business.
Yeah. It's an awful precedent, and you're going to lose the trust of a lot of Americans by doing this, in my view. I just don't think that. I think I think you're seeing firsthand of just the messages after the View. Like, there's a lot of people out there that, I think their voice has been stymied a little bit, but I think they're getting more and more courageous about coming out and being like, you know what, this doesn't work for me for X, Y, and Z. So hopefully that's the way we start going here in the future, but I'm not for sure. This Black Friday, celebrate softness season by stocking up on your favorite Tommy John underwear, loungewear, and pajamas. When you start your day wearing Tommy John, you're that much more comfortable, so you can do everything better. Shop their Black Friday sale right now and give the gift of comfort to everyone on your list, including yourself, with Tommy John men's and women's loungewear. With over 16 million pairs sold, giving the gift of Tommy John underwear and loungewear has become a holiday tradition for families all across the country. 98% of women and men love getting a gift from Tommy John. That's why Tommy John doesn't have customers. They have fanatics. This holiday, make everyone in your family that much more comfortable with the gift of Tommy John loungewear, underwear, and bras. Plus, it's all backed by Tommy John's best pair you'll ever wear, or it's free guarantee. During Tommy John's Black Friday sale, get 20% off site-wide at TommyJohn.com/uncut. Get 20% off for a limited time only at TommyJohn.com/uncut. Go right now to TommyJohn.com/uncut. See site for details. So what happened? I mean, did the View, did that kind of scare you off of doing media stuff? Or like, it doesn't seem like it. I mean, it seems like it might have just kind of lit a fire a little bit.
No, I mean, I've worked in media for a long time. I've been doing this for more than 10 years. And my opinions are always, to someone, they're always controversial, right?
Sure.
Maybe 90% I went through last year and had a lot of controversial political opinions, and even people on the right were like, no, we hate Jedediah. So I'm always kind of I'm a free thinking person, and I know that's going to upset people. I'm not going to shy away on this, because there's a lot of people around the country who feel this way.
Absolutely.
And they should feel comfortable to speak out. And remember, I wrote this book, Dear Hartley, to inspire my child to speak out. One of the key messages of it is raise children who feel okay to walk into rooms of people who disagree and to speak their mind and to defend themselves and to say and to listen and to allow themselves to be challenged and to have those tough conversations. But how could I tell my child to have that courage if I'm just going to cower away because of one conversation that on the View that didn't happen, that should have happened? My concern is just there's so many topics now that are becoming like, oh, well, shut this person down on this topic and this. There's too many of those. Yeah. There's no harm in just hearing people out. Yeah. You don't have to agree. You don't have to like what they say. You can walk away being like, wow, that person is completely insane. That's your opinion. That's fine. Some people listen to me and are probably like, wow, she's gone mad. That's fine. But let's just have it out. Like old style coffee house, like discuss, let's just talk. Yeah. Or it's going to be a really scary place if we live in a place where only one opinion, whatever the majority opinion is on any issue, is the accepted opinion and everyone else needs to shut up. That's not going to go very well for a lot of people in America, and it's just going to cause really big problems.
Oh, absolutely. And I've got dear friends that have completely different social, political, economic views than me. And, and I have conversations with them all the time. And I walk away being like, oh, that made sense. I get where they're coming
Right.
from. Like I might not get on board with it, but I understand where they're coming from and why it makes sense to them. And, I get it. That's fine with me. And to your point, like we've got to have more conversations like that. People have to be open minded to whichever side that you're on whichever issue it is. And until we get there, things like what happened to you on The View are going to continue to happen. But I hope that's not the case. I hope we can start finding safe spaces to have these conversations and to for everyone to view their opinions. So this, like you said, it's not just these one-sided arguments.
Yeah, you said something interesting about like in your real life,
Hmm.
people away from media. I mean, when I say real,
Yeah.
I always say my
Yeah.
real life is my life away from all the
Sure.
cameras, and
Sure.
you have these conversations. So that always leaves me thinking too, are there two worlds? I'm very immersed in the media world a lot
Yeah.
of the time where there's a lot of shutdown and there's like, this is the agenda of this network.
Hmm.
So everyone needs to fall in line.
Hmm.
But I always feel like that's just not representative of the
No,
population.
I don't
Like
think
I have
so.
friends who are vaccinated, unvaccinated, who feel I have super liberal friends that love, Bernie Sanders. I have
Hmm.
big Trump supporter
Yeah.
members of my family that we all like, we're just kind of like this hodgepodge of people that
Yeah.
that's my life.
Hmm.
That's not my media life. So I always look at it like, is media designed to create this division and kind of make people feel like the whole world looks like that, but it
Sure.
doesn't.
Not at all.
No, it doesn't.
Nope.
So, and you're saying your experience, that gives me hope because
Yeah.
when I talk to people outside of media, I hear all of this like, oh, my community, we all just kind of like, it just sounds very healthy,
Hmm.
and media sounds very unhealthy a lot of the
Yep.
time. So that's actually a good sign, what you just said to me. That's what I'm seeing as well. And I hope that's what people are seeing around the country and in the real world.
Totally agree. It's a melting pot out there. Even Nashville. I think Nashville gets labeled as this southern town, but even I've been here since 2001, going to school here, and I always felt like Nashville it has a southern feel, but like you get people from New York, you get people from L.A., you get people from Chicago. It's kind of this weird place in the South, but like you get a bunch of different values and economic statuses and political views, and people get along here. And I think that's kind of hopefully where we're headed in the U.S. But we'll see. We got to keep having these conversations, and people got to keep being brave on both sides of it, and we'll see where we go.
Yeah, just keep having them.
Yeah.
And when people in media don't have them or someone gets shut down, get upset about it
Yeah.
because maybe that wasn't your viewpoint, but if you wanted to hear it, like write those shows, speak out about why that bothered you.
Sure.
Because I think that media thinks they're doing everyone a service by creating this, this way or the highway. And it's not. People don't want it. That's why people are turning their televisions off
Hmm.
and listening to a podcast because they're
Hmm.
like, I don't need to be lectured at. I want to make my own decision. I want to hear people talk who are unfiltered and don't have an agenda. They're not trying to please a network. They're not trying to please a politician. They're just telling me their experience.
Yeah.
There's more and more of a hunger for that. So let those big media outlets and know that that's not what you want.
No.
And teach your kids to speak loudly and respectfully about the things that they value. So I appreciate you having me on and being so candid about it. I loved this exchange. This is an
Yes.
actual conversation.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time. Where do we find the book? 'Cause, I know that was a whole thing for The View, but they blew that up. So let's talk one more time about Dear Hartley.
Yeah, so it's adorable. If nothing else, look at this baby. I mean, there's just no cuter smile. It
Oh,
will put a smile
beautiful.
on every. It's a great Christmas gift too. I talk
Absolutely.
a lot about holidays. I talk a lot about family. I talk a lot about following your gut. Mistakes I made in the media business. If you're in the media business, you'll get a lot of laughs about that. Character. Let's just build children who can think for themselves, and regardless of your politics, wherever you stand on issues, build children that are able to challenge you one day with facts and say, hey mom, I
Yeah.
thought about this.
I love that.
Smart, independent minded
Yeah.
kids. That's what this book is a tribute to. They can get it on jedediahbila.com, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, everywhere books are sold. And I would love it if you would support free thinking regardless of your politics. I don't care.
Love
All
it.
are welcome in my world. So
That's an amazing message. I appreciate you taking the time. Go get Jedediah's book anywhere you can get books. Amazon, everywhere they sell them. Thank you so much.
thank you, Jay. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. You have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.
Thank you. Okay, that is it for Jedediah. That is it. I can't. Jedediah. That is it for Jedediah. Loved having her on. Go get her book, Dear Hartley, wherever you get books. I'm gonna get it and read it because I liked her style. I like what she had to say. Think for yourselves out there. Right? If it works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. Don't be afraid of either side of it. I think that we can all agree that everyone's different. Everyone is not the same. So I loved having her on. I hope you liked it. I hope you can hear both sides of this argument. I guess it's not an argument. I hope you can hear both sides of this issue. I know that there's a lot of people out there that are extremely outspoken on both sides of it. I know that there's a lot of people out there that have lost loved ones, and my heart goes out to you. And I'm sure that people that have lost loved ones or close relatives or close friends have a strong bias on this, which I'm totally willing to hear and totally support you, and I get it. This is just a issue that I don't think we're going to clear up in one day. We probably won't clear it up in 6 months. We're probably going to still be having these conversations 6 months from now. But I think it's important to have these conversations and talk it through and hear both sides and hear where everyone's coming from on this one. And I think that that goes to say for about everything that's happening in the world right now. We need to talk more, hear more. And have some of these tough conversations out. And so I appreciate Jedediah coming on. I appreciate hearing her. I know it probably wasn't easy for her. I'm sure she's getting bombarded with a million things. So I'm glad she picked this space to talk. So I'm sure I'll hear a lot on Twitter and Instagram about this one, and rightfully so. I get it, and I look forward to it. And we're gonna keep listening to you guys. If you have a guest or somebody out there that you want us to put on, hit us up and we'll do it. But that's a wrap for this one, and see you next week.